Welcome back to Season 5 of the True Blue Conversations podcast with your host, Adam Bloom. G'day, podcasters. Before we get underway with True Blue Conversations, just wanted to give a huge shout out to our friend and sponsor, the Warrior U podcast, hosted by Bram Connolly. Bram is a former Special Forces commander, best-selling author, popular podcast host, and human optimization pioneer. He has an authentic style and the unique ability to not only motivate, but also take people on a journey of self-discovery. Through the Warrior U podcast, Bram interviews guests in a bid to explore all things human optimization, resilience, leadership, and coffee. His book, The Commando Way, a Special Forces Commander's Lessons for Life, Leadership and Success, is available now on amazon.com.au. So from Adam Bloom and all of us here at True Blue Conversations, a big shout out to the Warrior U podcast, Bram Connolly, and his new book, The Commando Way, out now.
G'day! Welcome back to True Blue Conversations. I'm Adam Bloom. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, former 2nd Commando sniper veteran, John Dixon. And John served for a long, long time in the Australian Army and in the 2nd Commando Regiment. And he has joined us today to talk about his career and his life after service. So, hi John, thanks for joining us on the show, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam. Cheers.
Mate, it's an absolute honour and privilege to come up to beautiful Sunshine Coast, mate, and record this podcast with you. And, mate, before we get into your career, let's go back to a young John Dixon and let's talk about you growing up, what we like at school, what were your hobbies, and do you have any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I guess pretty standard sort of AJ dude, I think, or maybe SF guy. We seem to be... not too much interested in school, probably had, not too bad at grades, but, a lot of, if he applies himself, he could have done this or could have done that type on your report card. Constantly sort of looking out the window, waiting to get outdoors and do all the normal stuff that young boys want to do, like play footy and just run around the place and run amok. So, yeah, I guess schooling... like that was like that for primary school and high school all the way through. I was sort of just not so much interested, and from a young age I knew I wanted to be in the defence. So when it came time, I was eager to get out and knew I had enough sort of marks up my belt to get over the line. And that's where I sort of went with my schooling. It was more focused about what I could do afterwards than at the time. So and chasing girls maybe, but
always the way, mate. Chasing girls as a young fella, and
yep.
Sport. You were pretty sporty, or
pretty good at individual stuff like running and sprinting and things like that. And then played footy for a fair bit, rugby league, like proper football for anyone out there that wants to argue that point, but. So I grew up in Townsville and then a little bit north of there near Cardwell for a bit. So, rugby league was all the rage, and so we played that. But and got up to heaps of shenanigans up there. And, brothers and sisters. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. One of my younger brothers passed just recently, not too long ago, a couple of years ago. To suicide, unfortunately, so that is what it is. But so I've got 1 surviving brother and 2 surviving sisters, and I'm the oldest.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. And then, so sorry to hear, mate, of your brother. That's, really sorry to hear that. And so, did you have any family members that had served in the ADF, or were you the first?
Pretty much. Most of my family members served in the ADF up until my parents' generation. My old man was a couple of years short of going into Vietnam, and then I think he made an attempt, but his parents had to sign off on it, and his dad, having been in World War II, was no way. So he missed it, and then the rest of us, so then I rejoined it. But we had great grandparents in Light Horse, Boer War, World War II, RAF, everywhere. So, a pretty broad history of it.
And for you, obviously being a young fella, you, as you mentioned, you had an interest in the military, but what was the driving factor for you in the end that made you join in 2000?
Geez, I think it was like always that interest. Obviously, I'd made the decision pretty early on. Growing up in Townsville, you're surrounded by military, so we used to go to all the open days and things like that. But come to 2000, East Timor kicked off in 1999, so everything was mobilising out of Townsville and Darwin. And so sort of watching that unfold spurred me to sort of hit the recruiting office. So, that's how that kicked off about a year earlier than I anticipated.
Yep.
And I thought, I want to be part of that. And pretty much, a year from like first stepping in the recruiting office to setting foot on the ground in East Timor, pretty much.
So for you, so how old were you when you went to Kapuka? And back then, the internet was in its early days, so did you dial the phone 1901 or what was the process like back then when you went to join up?
Yeah, so I probably didn't even know the number, to be honest. I just strolled into the recruiting office in the middle of, it used to be in Townsville in the city there, just walked in and had no idea, and did a few little things on just then and there. They sort of gave me a bit of a chat, and they actually weighed me and said that you need to put on some weight. I was pretty skinny, running around, not eating much, and they said come back in about a month, try and put on X amount of kilos, and which I did. Just went ate like crappy food and sit around and didn't do much, and then they took me in from there.
Yeah, right. And then, so how old were you when you got to Kapuka? And for you, what was that like? Was it the shock and awe of, oh shit, okay, like what do you remember of Kapuka and what was the most challenging part of it?
Yeah, I was 17 when I hit Kapuka, probably, just shy of 17 and a half. It was a huge shock. Like I just hadn't been, in a proper workforce, let alone like something as crazy as the army can be. And it was still in a bit of those shock and awe days.
No, a bit of political correctness still was...
That was that wasn't even heard of, political correctness at that point. So, to be honest, I hit it and I hated it. Somehow I caught Ross River virus just before I went, which is like a lower grade version of malaria.
Yep.
So I was battling that as well. And, so I hated Kapuka and pretty much tried to pull off within the first week, I think. And, the section commander, he bullied me into staying. He goes, I'll give it another 2 weeks, and he goes, I'll let you pull off if you still want to go in 2 weeks. By then I sort of found my feet and I was like running and it wasn't too bad, sort of started to get indoctrinated a bit, but we had all those early wake up calls with machine guns through the windows and smoke grenades in the hallways and that was our fire drill and all that crazy stuff that they used to do back then. Yeah.
And then, so you finish your time at Kapuka and then you do your initial employment training and you obviously went as an infantryman. So you went for
correct.
Infantry and went up to Singleton. And what was that like? Because I've heard from a lot of the veterans that I've had on that Kapuka's Kapuka. And then you get to Singleton and you go, oh shit, that's another. So what was that like for you at Singleton?
Well, I actually liked Singleton. It was a big change for me. It was more focused to my job and not general army stuff. And that's probably what led me to the SF thing later on. It was just the more army, like in my mind, the more army focused, arms corps stuff and, refining that. Every time I hit something that refined that fighting sort of capability, I enjoyed. So I think I hit Singleton. We had freedom on the weekends to go out and do stuff, and then during the week we were actually doing army stuff. Like it was hard, it was difficult, but it was what I would imagine the army to be.
Yep.
To a degree. So it was pretty good.
And back then, did you have a choice of where you wanted to go, and what battalion did you choose at first to serve in?
Yeah, we did have a choice, and we had preferences, and I think it was 1, 2, and 4 were my preferences. I think, winding the clock back here a bit. And then I went to 1 hour out. I was like, like I shouldn't have come back to Townsville, but one was good to me. So no, yeah.
And for you, so as you mentioned, you finish your training, you go to I've got it here, B Company in 1RR.
Yep.
And then, as you said, that you deployed very quickly to East Timor in that following, like after you'd pretty well boots on the ground.
Yep.
What do you remember that first trip overseas?
Yeah, it was good. Like it was everything. When I got to battalion, was a quick build up to going overseas. So I was still learning, still pretty much doing like on the job training by the time while I was in country. So it was difficult in terms of I'd only just sort of turned 18, and you're learning at the same time from like understudying your senior diggers. At the same time, you're actually on operations employing, potentially employing lethal force if had to. So it was an interesting time for sure, and I was still playing catch up and then also learning more about the world. Like I hadn't really seen anything or done anything outside of Townsville too much, and now I was seeing misery on a massive scale, death to a degree, and probably the, wouldn't say fear, but the sort of sitting in the back of your mind, like, oh, we could be in contact. There was still little skirmishes going on.
Yeah.
That didn't happen for me directly, but I was still in and about some little skirmishes that sort of happened.
So for you, good sort of starting sort of the foundations for what you would go on and do, and like little skirmishes here and there, and probably at the time going, oh shit, and then as your career progressed, you're going, oh yeah, no, this is a skirmish, right? Yeah, bit different when you went to the Middle East, and and sort of back then too, was it like jungle patrols and all that sort of stuff over in Timor?
Yeah, and it was hard routine and jungle patrols and things like that, and it's where I got to meet like a lot of different guys, Bravo Company, a lot of guys that have been on this podcast or other podcasts have come out of, like Declan, Redmond, and Todd Langley. Like I was there when he shot some militia on the border and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so we're in a few checkpoints around that area. So I mean, it was good. It was certainly laid the foundation. So like, I mean, I never got shot at or shot anyone there and things like that, but it laid a really solid foundation, because instead of just training at high range, you're training with, potentially a threat is lurking about. So, you really are wired a little bit tighter than usual.
So you come back from that deployment, and then 9/11 happens, mate. And what do you remember of that day, and where were you?
Like most people, I was woken up with some rude phone call at 2 a.m. or something like that, like turn your TV on. And then sort of went back to sleep a bit bewildered, didn't really know what it meant. And then the next day you lined up for hours trying to get into Lavrak barracks, and they're doing all their checks and whatnot. And, the first thing is, oh, we're all going to war and this and that. And the first few weeks it was all like, everyone's going 1 hours first off the bat, all the rumour mill, digger mills going overtime. And then then it just went cold and went back to doing what we do, so normal battalion stuff.
So, and then we go, after that happens, it's sort of, as you say, back to battalion, sort of what, normal life, battalion life, as I've been told by many of the guys. And then, in 2003, you post into 6RAR and Delta Company, and the famous Delta Company, mate. And for people who aren't, I'm sure most people know what happened in 1966, the Battle of Long Tam with Delta Company. And mate, what was that like for you? And you deploy again to East Timor again, and how had the country changed from when you were first there on your first deployment? Yeah,
so firstly, marching into 6RAR Delta Company was good. And had a really good core foundation of people, and I think even though Long Tan happened like a long time before we got there was still like a little bit of pride and a little bit of extra culture in the company within itself, which was probably demonstrated later on in Afghan by that company. But so it was good marching in with them, and then we returned to Tully and RCB, Malaysia and everything I tried to get away from. 6RAR managed to nail it down in their pre-work up to heading back to East Timor. So that was a little bit unpleasant, but it was fine. And then back to Timor and totally changed. Like it was very, it was very stable. Probably didn't take things as serious. We did patrolling, but it was much more overt patrolling, like, up the streets, sleeping in schoolhouses and whatnot. So felt very safe, but, you're still carrying live rounds and still in the back, recesses of your mind, there's still potential of something not going your way. So, it's better than training still.
Yeah, and then, so you come back from that trip, and then in 2006, mate, you decide to go and dip your toes in the water of Special Forces and do your entry test. And where had that sort of, you'd been in at that stage 6 years, so
Yep.
Where did that come from? Did you want that next challenge, or what made you want to go down the Special Forces path?
Yeah, I think initially when I joined the Army, Special Forces was out of reach. I just didn't really see it as a possibility. I was fit, but I didn't do anything on my own outside of the Army's PT program. But during that second trip to Timor, I started to train. Did a recon course, did a mortar course, and started to see, maybe it was a little bit more obtainable than I thought, and doing those little stepping stones. And then I guess the only people going to Afghan at that point was Bushmaster drivers for SF. So it was either fight for a Bushmaster course or go SF, and I thought, you know what, I definitely want to go SF, and then it was the decision time on which unit. Obviously Perth stood out, and I had a lot of friends going there. We sort of really didn't want to go West Coast, live on the West Coast, and that was a big factor, for us, for family, because I had a wife too, so I had to take in her. She didn't want me going SF at all. I sort of just said I'm going, but but also those Defender magazines were coming out and Contact mags and starting to show off the Tag East, and the raising of the Commando was starting to get to something that was a bit different. Like, it wasn't what it was when I first joined. It was something that was growing, and you could see that capability was starting to take a sharp turn upwards. So thought, you know what, maybe get in on the ground floor of this and see where it goes, and if it didn't work out the way it did, potentially I could have moved on to Perth or given it a crack. So 4AR turned into something else, and it was the place to be.
So for you, how many started selection and how many finished? And for you, how did you start to mentally prepare for selection?
Yeah, it's a real hard one. Mentally preparing for selection, it's no easy. Everyone asks, what's the trick to selection, and everyone goes, it's mental. Well, you've got to be fit for one. You have to be. It's not, you can't turn up there a slug and just be mentally tough. It's just not going to work out. But it divides, the physically fit and the ones that are mentally fit at the same time. So I think just training hard is the only way to do it, really, is to replicate, doing that extra rep at the gym or doing that extra pack march, loading extra kilos into your pack when you don't have to. You're doing a PT session, and then after PT you're going to go to the gym as well, and just going that one step further helps you mentally prepare. You're always doing a bit more than just the average person. So everyone knocks off on a Friday and you do a pack march before going out on the beers, where everyone's on the beers at 4 o'clock. You're stomping till 6. You can play catch up beers. A few tequila shots is fine. It'll get you back there with everybody else. But plus you've done the hard stuff first. So I think that sort of gets you where you need to be.
And for you, mate, were you at a point that you sort of honed in and had purpose and were just solely focused on, I'm going for this? There's no, I don't want that what if I don't finish, at least I attempted. Was that sort of the mindset you had?
Yeah, I guess I knew I was fit enough. I'd prepared as best as I could, and then it was just going to be whether I could pull it out on the day, really. And I figured, just go for broke and they're not going to kill you as much as it feels like they are going to kill you at some point. Is either, I'll just wake up in the hospital because I've like run out of steam and collapsed, and or I break something. And either way, like, you're fine with that. And I sort of went with that mentality, not to pull off. And, what's the point of doing 3 or 4 days of selection plus the training leading up to it and then pulling off like for nothing? Like you've done 6 months, a year worth of training and 3 days of like pain, or a week of pain, 2 weeks of pain, then pulling off. Like, so the further I got into it, the easier it became, because I just didn't want to pull off and just be left with, blistered feet, sore back for nothing. So I was just like, well, I might as well get something out of this if they're going to put me through the grinder. And so that was my mentality, is just keep going. I think the guys that struggled on it they couldn't get out of their mind forwards of the position they were currently in. So you're in pain, you're struggling carrying a log or whatever. You're not going to do that forever. Like, they're going to stop eventually. It's maybe not as soon as you think, but it will stop, and at some point you will rest. And, they just couldn't see that far ahead. They were just hurting. And, whereas I used to try... there was times I thought I'd pull off, but I used to just think, it'll stop eventually. Yeah.
So for you, mate, how many started and how many finished? And looking back now, and it was, a long time ago, what was the hardest part of selection for you?
So 70 started, 10 finished. Hardest part of selection was what they call demarcation. And I think they have 2 lots of it now. It's where they pretty much don't feed you, and there's no sleep for a period of time, X amount of days. And they keep you up all night doing different stands and working like bull rings type thing. And then you're doing operations during the day, like exercises, like setting up ambushes and things like that. And I'd missed the briefing on that. I hadn't even heard about demarcation. Everyone's talking about it. And I thought, that's bullshit. They got to feed us at some point, and they got to give us some sleep. And as it turns out, they didn't feed us or give us any sleep. So I was a little bit mentally unprepared for that. But like I said, I was already too far down the line to pull out. Like, I was just like, well, I'll just pass out at some point, and I'll just wake up and they'll say, sorry mate, you failed. So just kept running it until I was and somehow scraped through.
And then so you pass selection, and then you go on to Rio cycle. And was there anything in the Rio cycle that you struggled with, or you were pretty okay going through the Rio cycle?
Mostly pretty okay. There's things that you naturally don't like. Swimming at night around Port, around Phillip Island, down, those type of things. Sharks not a real big fan of them. I
don't think many are.
Yeah, so I think you're definitely outside your comfort zone. Definitely wasn't a fan of roping, like in general, just heights to a degree, but you just do it and get on with it. And I think that's the difference between, SF and, a lot of other sort of places. And it's not that you're not afraid of something, it's just that you're afraid of it, but, you're going to set yourself up properly and you're going to do it. And you've got faith that you've got the ability to do it, and like the staff have got the ability to look after you and set you up right, and you've been trained well. So I think, so there's definitely times I not struggle, but I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
And parachuting, wasn't a real big fan of that initially, but you didn't have time to think about it. They're just throwing you out of a plane at a rapid rate, and you just hope for the best. So that was, and I'm sort of a lighter guy, so I didn't hit the ground as hard as some of the other boys. So it wasn't too bad. And
then, so you finished Rio cycle, mate, and then so for RAR, what company do you post into?
Bravo Company, and so a lot of the Bravo Company team commanders were running us through our Rio, so that was, they were picking and choosing who they wanted to come to Bravo, as they were next off the slate, I think, in 2007 to go overseas. So they were sort of picking the better guys, or iron off what might be problems and things like that. So it was good to be raised by the guys that were going to lead us. So,
and then, so because I know it's changed now, but did you have a beret parade and get presented your beret? Or And what was that like for you, mate? Fine, after all, blood, sweat and tears, to finally achieve something that you set your mind to. What was that like for you, receiving your beret for the first time?
Yeah, I think it was pretty good. Like, and I say that because, we've had a trip looming. And so you're sort of always looking for the next peak with NSF, like to make sure that you're going to be capable, and you don't want to let anyone down. So while the beret was fine to get, like at that point we were going to go to a Bravo company, and some of those guys have deployed to Afghan before. So we're more focused on, I guess, impressing them or living up to like what we supposed to be than we were worried about a beret at that point. Like, it might be different in peacetime when you're getting it. It might mean a little bit more, but at that point we just wanted to live up to and hopefully be at a standard that they could work with. So we're more worried about that than our berets. Like, we're definitely grateful to receive the beret, don't get me wrong, but we definitely had other things on our mind.
Well, you mentioned that in 2007 you deployed to Afghan for your first trip with Bravo Company. And what do you remember of this trip, and how long were you away, and what were your first thoughts of the country when you got there? And at that time, what was the role and the capabilities of the commandos within Task Force 66 in 2007?
Yeah, so the trip was good. Obviously you get to country and it's just like, it's a magnificent country. It's bewildering. And at that point, like, there was enemy all sort of still surrounding where we were. Nothing had really been taken. Not a lot of it had been taken, I'd say, and the very first night I got there, you turn up in dark, and then you wake up in the morning, you're sort of looking around, and then that next night, the boys took us around their vehicles, and they're sweeping, link out of the cars because they've just been in a massive contact. We took over from Alpha Company, and then we grabbed a few beers and sat up on the tower, and we were watching the Dutch getting absolutely hosed over by the Taliban, just up in the Chora Valley. So, like, it was pretty surreal sort of feeling. And then, within a week from that sort of thing, we were out there ourselves, getting amongst it. And, we did what they call a nursery patrol, where there's always enemy. You're not really supposed to... We're sort of shaken out and trying to get used to the vehicles and practice a few things. And then we end up in a big fight, though. So a really, really big fight for our first one, which is super intense and lasted a good half a day. And Winchestered a whole heap of B-2 bombers and things like that, and it was pretty full on as a first little hit out.
So for you, because you obviously deployed. What month did you deploy in 2007?
I feel as though it was June-ish. So, like, fighting season is well underway, and during that time, as we were sort of 3-ish platoons as a company with the TF-66. Perth were doing their counter leadership sort of strikes. We were doing a little bit of that, but then, like, we had places to take, right? We needed to extend the safety bubble out for MRTF and MTF. So our job was to keep finding where the enemy were, then push them back. And then, we took Chora Valley off them and then put in a fob, like the infantry put in a fob. So we just kept sort of pushing that bubble bigger and bigger and going down different valleys, finding a fight, pushing them out of there and creating that safety net for them. So that was our main job in 2007. And we're just armed to the teeth, mostly all vehicle ops, I think. So, we're in the SRVs and the LRPVs, and every second car's got a 50 cal. Every other car's got a Mark 19, and so we're just bristling and just go out there and just, run into them and then get amongst it.
So for you, you mentioned that your nursery patrol, you had a contact. What are some of the more memorable contacts that you remember of that first trip with the Taliban?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was definitely one because, we just got shot to shit, and we're lucky to sort of get away with what we got. Only the officers got shot, 2 of them straight up, so... I mean, and they weren't bad, but, officers standing in the open, it was probably expected to happen. So, it was a good sort of wake-up call. I probably didn't take it as serious as what it was at the time. All our training was pretty realistic, so you sort of, you don't realise. And I first saw Taliban in the low ground on the exit from that ambush, and they were shooting our fuel tank out. I could feel the air sort of moving around, and shot our cars to bits, and we got out, and then I was in mortars at the time, deployed mortars on those guys. So there was that. There was taking of Chora Valley, where we moved north to cut off enemy reinforcements, and we got stuck in there with those reinforcements coming down, and we got a high value target as well up there who was coordinating all of that. There was that. Went up to FOB Anaconda with the Green Berets. They were besieged, so they couldn't move outside their FOB without absolutely getting hosed.
Yep.
So we went out there and extended their bubble as well. So cruised out with them. It was pretty good to get out and amongst it with them. And then, a few small ticks for me. Being in mortars, I was back with the vehicles a lot. So, the other boys were seeing the ticks, or, the snipers were finding the guys, and I was dropping bombs, so I didn't see a whole heap. And then my last contact was the Luke Worsley DA that sort of stands out for a lot of guys that were there.
Yep.
And,
well, if you could, mate, because I know you served alongside Luke, and if you can share what you remember of that night and what that loss to Bravo meant he was the first man of 4RR to make the ultimate sacrifice. So can you just share a little bit of, if you can?
Yeah. No, that's no dramas. So I was in mortars. One of the assault team guys was sick, and I swapped out with him. Went into the assault team, and that's how I got in amongst that. Otherwise, I would have still been back at the VDO. Vehicle drop-off area. And, anyway, so we walked in over some pretty crazy terrain. I think it was about 5Ks line of sight and 7Ks over just mountainous terrain. Initially, we sort of made our way, found the target compounds. Some people say that we were spotted. Some people say that we weren't. I don't think we were. We moved. It was bright moonlight, though. And we moved down 2 different alleyways. So we separated from Cam Baird's team, and he went into the bigger compound with Luke Worsley. And then we had a series of compounds to the right. So they broke left, we broke right. I started clearing in through a few rooms, and through about a shoebox-sized window, I saw a guy jump into an alleyway behind us. And he had an RPK in his hand. I spun around, ran back outside, started pointing to the rear guy who was already sort of locked onto him. And then, the guy insurgent come bolting out. It was already too late for him. The guys were on him. There was lasers going everywhere, and he'd see his arms snapping backwards and deformities starting to happen. So, and I think I got a few late shots in there. And then there was a bit of a pause. Everything went quiet. And then we just heard this massive machine gun burst from the compound, just right beside us from where he jumped from. And that was the burst that would have killed Luke Worsley. And then we heard the return fire. From then we had there's just guys jumping off the roof, people pouring out of compounds, some armed, some not armed. And then they sort of mounted counter assaults as well, because we were in that moonlight and they could see us on external parts of the building. At that point in time, we kept clearing our area of responsibility, not knowing how badly the other team was in trouble, and thought they sort of had it under control. They most certainly cleared that compound, and it was a very violent knife fight for them, very violent. And lots of heroic actions on their behalf. And we had sort of little running skirmishes on the outside, and cleared our area of responsibility. We heard man down at the start. I didn't really think of it as man down as in we've had a KIA. I thought, someone's sprained their ankle or something. I think we just got used to pulling it off, right? What as the cats would say, getting away with it.
Yep.
Their song that's been taken out of context. But, and it wasn't until the end that the team commander had come around, and this was a couple of hours of fighting and taking prisoners, and, and said, Luke Worsley's gone. And, it's starting to get light, and we needed helicopter to come get his body. The same FOB of the ODA, the Green Berets up north, were seriously under attack, and all helicopter support was going to them, and they'd taken serious casualties. It was getting light, so a decision was made, we'll carry him out. And that was a contentious little point. People were a bit upset that, Chopper wasn't carrying him out, coming to get him. But I think in the end, taking him out the way that we did was very respectful, carrying him out our own people off the battlefield. And it was it hit us hard, I think, being the first one for the unit, and then and then seeing it too, I guess, for yourself. And Luke Worsley's DA always stands out because, one, we lost Luke and he was a good guy, good operator and things like that. But also, those type of direct action tasks weren't the norm yet. And whereas in our 2011, 2013 trip, that type of intensity was pretty normal. We just hadn't experienced it yet. So now heads were definitely in the game, or a bit razzled, depending on how you came out of that one. Obviously, it was a messy affair carrying Luke out and stuff like that. So it was a bit tough, and then getting back to VDO and seeing the other guys, and carrying had to march the prisoners out and stuff like that. But if Luke hadn't have passed, it would have been like the biggest, most, fun job, successful, fun, great job. But unfortunately, that's what happened. So. And
for you, as you mentioned, as you said, it's now. You were playing for keeps now, it was, Luke had made the ultimate sacrifice and doing what he did, I've heard other guys speak that, he gave a target indication and, so to protect his boys, and he made the ultimate sacrifice, just doing his job, doing what he, and as you said, I wanted to bring that up because, and I thank you for sharing that because, it is it's hard when you lose any soldier, but you served alongside him and you knew him. So, But I also think because we lost him and it was such a hard DA or hard fight, I think, for Bravo Company specifically, a lot of the warriors sort of and the strong, SF soldiers were born pretty much out of that contact. Everyone who was lifting their weight and doing their fair share. But, the real sort of, hard charges started to rise to the top after that because, and Canberra's a prime example of that. So, but even, the number 2 scout for, that was with Luke, he stepped over Luke's body as he was getting dragged out and he hammered several Taliban positions all by himself, as no one else was in the compound yet, and he just stood there and just hammered them all by himself, it was only for a short time, a good 10 seconds before anyone else could join him. And then he kept moving forward. So, and that person's not recognised, but he became a notable person within the unit. So you got guys like that. Then Cam got in there, and then once they joined up, they decided, well, let's get this going and, crack on. And the boys got amongst it. So, crazy for what they did, mate. And as you say, your training kicks in. And at that stage, in 2007, as you said, you were in the the sub-light vehicles? Was that what?
Yeah, the special reconnaissance.
Yeah, special
vehicle.
reconnaissance. So
most of us were in those. Yeah.
And for that, so the IED threat, it wasn't as prevalent as it became in later deployments and later trips.
Yeah, it wasn't as high. We tried to drive where they weren't or clear where they weren't. In saying that, coming back from that FOB Anaconda, the Perth guys came up as well, and I think their bomb dog actually sat on a pressure plate on our way back. So it's not like they weren't around. One of our vehicles ran over one of the SRVs, but it didn't go off. It was just the top charge and it blew the tyre off. So, lucky for them, if the main charge had gone, it would have killed them all. And then I think Poppy Pierce was killed on that trip. I'm pretty sure we saw that. We were in the area and we just saw a massive sort of cloud, a fair way off, 10 Ks away, and then got back to base and they'd sort of said this had happened and we're pretty sure that was the one. But, so the IED threat was lower, and then, she started to climb pretty rapidly.
So for that, as you said, you carry Luke back, and then did you, obviously, what was that like experiencing your first of many, unfortunately, ramp services? What was that like for you when you were there?
Yeah, it was pretty hectic, pretty emotional, seeing someone and seeing, your first flag draped coffin. We weren't back from operations when when some of the other Australians that were killed during that trip had gone on. So,
Matty Locke, I think.
Yeah. So we were still up there to the north blocking that off, I think, when he went out, I think. Yeah, so and then now it's one of your own guys, right? And like, there's something about that flag drake coffin that pulls on the old heartstrings a bit. But yeah, it was really daunting. But after the assault that we did as well, they kept us in the field for another 2 nights, which is a typical SF trait, is not to bring everyone back straight away. Like, get back on the horse and finish off on a win. So we kept on doing operations and went back for the ramp ceremony. And for me, that was the end of my trip. Half the people were going home then because we're heading into winter, and the other half would stay for another few months or 2 months.
So you come back from your first trip and get back to the unit, and what happened for you in 2008? What were you doing? Were you on tag then, or what happened in 2008?
No, so 2008, we're picking up. So now, like, 4 hours it's going to change into something else. So new courses are coming up, extra courses, extra skill sets. So we're starting to pick up all our other courses that are going to be required. And the lines are starting to get drawn in the sand, like, we had a pretty good ability of, selecting the right people, but some people were just not going to keep up with that type of load. So the line was drawn in the sand, and, you either got through those skills and courses, or you didn't, and you sort of had to move on from the unit. So we were picking up those skills, knowing that we're turning into something else, and at the same time we were slated for early 2009 trip, and so we were getting ready for that. So new hierarchy, and just starting to get the new guys ready and get back into it.
So in 2009, as you just mentioned, you deploy again, so to in Afghanistan in Bravo, and so for you, as you said, lines were being drawn. And so 4RAR had changed to now 4RAR Commando, for anyone who doesn't understand listening to this, who's a non-military, you changed the name to, so mid-trip, to the 2nd Commando Regiment. What was the change for, John? What happened, and why did they go away from 4RAR Commando?
Basically, it just become a special operations regiment. Like, the capability and skills had gone too far. I think a lot of it was because, one, we got tagged, the tag role, so that sent a very sharp capability drive, and we're on operations. So 4 would have been a slow grind, I think, without operations or without tag to get where it went. So, and then it got to a point where we just couldn't be aligned with the Royal Australian regiments, and that's why it was changed to its own regiment, and it was making itself known as its own special operations regiment in its own right. So
for you, was the name? It was a good change. Like, it was well received across the unit.
Oh, definitely. I think they did give us a multi-choice questionnaire, and 2nd Commando Regiment wasn't on it. We did sort of initially wanted to drift from the Commando name, because it didn't sort of represent exactly what we were doing. But it is what it is. They decided to slate us as 2nd Commando Regiment, and we achieved, obviously, a lot under that. But yeah, it was a welcome change. Pay grades changed, skill sets changed, which just opened up a whole new world. We'd done the hard work. Now we were refining everything, and we were just going, hitting peak after peak. What's the next one? What's the next capability that we can make ours and be the best at? So, yeah.
So for you, when you first joined, like when you came in 2006, did you foresee that the growth in the capabilities of the unit would get to where it got to, and then obviously it went further and further? Did you see that when you first joined, and did you think the unit was capable of that?
Yeah, I could see the growth, but when I joined, at that point only one company was doing the CT stuff, Tag East, and then they go up in dribs and drabs as people got advanced close quarter combat. So it was a little bit hard to tell, but you could see it was advancing, and then all of a sudden it just started to skyrocket around about that 2009, 2010 area, where we were getting a reputation in Afghanistan for the work we were doing, and then we were getting selected. They go, hey, you're going to do this operation, from well higher up outside the Australian Army Chain of Command, like ISAF, and we'd successfully do it, and they go, shit, well, they did that pretty good. Like, let's give them this. And our jobs got bigger and bigger and better and better. And every time that we kicked a goal, they're just going, holy shit, like, yeah, let's keep going. So it was operationally driven, and then we'd come back with new TTPs and, develop them back home and then roll back over again.
So we'll mention now. So we'll mention your 2009 trip, and so what type of mission profiles and roles were you doing on your 2009 trip compared to your 2007 trip?
Yeah, so it's still a bit of pushing out the bubble, making sure that the MTF had a workspace. But lines were drawn in the sand too between Perth and Sydney, where they were going to stay on the key leadership guys and hit them, and which sort of got them mostly working in and around Oruzgan, and then they started to look for harder missions for us, like missions that needed to be done in other provinces, and we were able to freely sort of move down. So our first job was about a 4-week job in Helmand province with a 2-pronged attack between us and an ODA company, where we hit the Kajaki Fan. And for people that know that place, it's a hard place to break into, and we had to trick the Taliban into thinking that we were going to take it. And we would draw these guys towards us, as many as we could get, hundreds of them, and it was to help the parachute regiments, the British guys, to do a relief in place, get some other equipment into the dam and things like that. So once we'd drawn them to us, and there was just hundreds and hundreds, and it was just shooting backwards and forwards every day, and we'd take a bit more, then we'd release it a bit and pretend to get pushed back. But there was just aircraft stacked every 1,000 feet up to like 20,000 feet, just dropping bombs. There was a lot of ordnance, and there's a lot of video footage of just missiles flying both ways. It was a bit of a hellfight, and we lost Brett Till on day 3 of that mission, I think. The IED threat picked up. We lost the Bushmaster a few days after that, and then Damien Tomlinson had lose his legs like a week after that. So we're starting to see that IED threat, and so we sort of did some really big jobs. Came back and did some more stuff around Oruzgan, and then I think we did our first helicopter DA as well onto a pretty hard target on that trip too.
So for that, like, as you mentioned, so you were starting to push like towards Helmand and Kajaki, and like at that stage, like, because I've heard from other operators say that Helmand was just that province you just didn't want. It was their safe haven, and
oh yeah, 100%.
They were were they just fanatical fighters in Helmand?
Oh yeah, and they always have been and always will be. Like, they were the hardest of the sort of, you had pockets of other really hard resistance, but Helmand, they're just surrounded. Like, I know the birthplace, I'm pretty sure, was in Oruzgan, but that was their safe haven, and they had free travel in and out through porous borders and stuff like that. Resupply was good. They had lots of ammunition. They were well set up. Not only were we having SF had decent ROE, but you still got one hand tied behind your back, and they are a defender as well. So like you really are. It is a bit, it's a violent place. Like, it's really violent. Everyone wants to go there. Like, in terms of, like, if you're an SF guy, like, there's a job in Helmand and there's limited numbers. There's a bit of a knife fight to get onto the helicopter. It was getting there for the first time, real eye opener on how, like, that one was almost like, because it was not a conventional type fight, but it's sort of, we had these, they had like trenches and tunnel systems, so it sort of had a conventional feel to it in some parts. And you could see just how many numbers they could muster and how much ordnance they could muster was a little bit concerning. Like, they had no shortage of rockets or mortars, and they were quite happy to send them your way. So, yeah.
So for you mentioned that you lost Brett Till very early on in country. Like, you were in country that was early on. And then you had Damo lose his legs, and he's previous guest on this podcast. And how was that on? Obviously, you were there in 2007 when Luke was killed.
Yep.
How was that on you guys as a company? Like, and obviously unfortunately, you would all get accustomed to losing a lot of guys in the coming years. But what was the mood amongst the boys when this was happening?
Yeah, not good, like particularly at the start of the operation. Like, and for guys like myself, my last live op was carrying Luke out. Now my first live op is Brett Till exploding like a couple of, cars in front of us. And you've got another 3.5 weeks of hard fighting. You haven't even got to Helmand yet. So, yeah, it's concerning, and your self-preservation starts to get into the back of your mind, which is not something you want to let creep in. You want to try and push that out as much as you can, because it's not self-preservation what you want as a SF dude. It's team preservation. But like if that fear sort of hooks into you, so I think a little bit of that started to drift in, and it can be contagious too, particularly when you cop and hit after hit. But once we got in there, particularly after Damien lost his legs and really started to give it to these guys, then, you start to be able to push those things aside, and mentally you start to able to bounce back. But yeah, I'd say a few people were rattled on the 09 trip, not in a terribly bad way, but yeah, you've taken some big hits, and then, things that then are about to change for our 2011 trip and whatnot.
So for you, because you're obviously pushing through that valley into Helmand. So, and I know I had Ant on the podcast, and he said that was like one of the most dangerous valleys that you like. And he mentioned it that he said for 32 hours we just slept on the vehicle. We wouldn't dare get off.
No.
You wouldn't dare get off the vehicles. And
yeah.
So that IED threat at that stage, was that can you just explain to the listeners, was it just like a pinch in the valley, or what actually?
There was one towards the end. It's called the Shamrock Pass, which was a bit unnerving going up that. But the valley itself, I think, when the operation was planned to go down to Helmand, they actually wanted us to clear the road of mines. I think that came from higher up. Said, well, can you clear it? We actually could have driven around most of them in hindsight. But I think that they wanted some type of deliberate clearance, and I think that's how we went down that path. So I think we end up clearing about 30 IEDs in that valley.
Yeah, right.
And whether they were exploited and blown up or just marked at some point because we just got bogged down. Like Ant said, we were supposed to be long gone through that. We didn't anticipate the death, and then we didn't anticipate being bogged down for that long. Then the Shamrock Pass, it finishes just in this tiny little, going up an escarpment, and it is quite, a bit of a closed sort of gap and quite tight. Our mortars put some bombs in there the night before, just sent them in there because it was a likely enemy spot, which was, as luck would have it, enemy were there at the time, because when we got there in the morning, there was a hole dug, and next to it was the IED sitting there, which they had abandoned and taken off because our bombs had landed right on them. So they were either killed or out of there. But as you sort of go up this windy little track, there's Humvee bodies off the side and things like that. I saw a finger, a whole finger on the side of the road. I was like, oh, fuck this. She was dangerous, all right. And then we got up to the top and thought we'd have a bit of kip. And then they just started launching 107s at us, rockets. So, it was pretty funny, mate.
And then, so you come back from that trip, and obviously 2010 rolls in, and you head on to Tag East and Assault Platoon.
Yep.
And then you do your SF sniper course. And how hard was your sniper course? And what made you choose to go down snipers?
This is our first year rolling on tag, so it's another steep learning curve. They put you through your paces right at the start to make sure that you're suitable to even be on it, particularly as you're going on the first time. Then I loved tag assaulting, you're roping into buildings in the city, doing all the cool stuff, all the sexy stuff you would have seen on SF ads, Navy SEALs movies and stuff like that, ship underway, and doing all the real cool stuff, so I loved it. Always kept an eye on snipers, I guess. once again, something I thought was unobtainable, I started to think, yeah, maybe this is the way to go. And plus I was still had my mortar qualification, which I didn't want to get dragged back into mortars. So I was, at the time, mortars was like, when we were using vehicles, was not a place that I wanted to be personally. I'd already done that and didn't want to get dragged back into it. Mortars had turned into something else once we got the 60mm mortars. They were a mad little assault team running around with 60mm, and they had the time of their lives, so I probably should have stuck around. But no, I did the sniper course, and it was difficult. It was a sink or swim course back then. You know, we didn't get too much coaching. It was either you had it or you didn't, and it was tough. And it went for about 10 weeks. And because you've got the CT component of it, I guess, which is a lot of extra work that needs to be put in apart from the green rolls, and a lot of extra precision and a lot of extra skills and capabilities you need to pick up for hostage rescue. So, yeah.
And for you, obviously, like, because snipers, mate, it's... So you got your sights, so a lot of maths and a lot of calculation of wind and all that sort of thing.
Initially it was less. There was like we hadn't headed into the ballistic computer. We were only just starting to. But there was a lot of. It was probably less like clinical and mathematical. It was more just skill set. We had wind formulas and things like that. That we had to work out, but then as snipers sharply then progressed because of the war on terror as well, and where we would use ballistic computers, use new types of wind formulas and, you know, equipment, and where, maths started to rear its ugly head, and I was like, damn it. Like,
Thought I'd got away from that.
Yeah, it was that, and DEMS were the only ones where I had to use my brain, and Ohm's law and all that type of stuff. I'm just like, Jesus Christ. But no, it was, there's a bit to it now, so yeah.
So back in those days, like as you said, you had the sink or swim in with that course. Was there any part of that course that was really you struggled and you found a challenge, or was it you just went, all right, it's just another process I just need to get through to just get the, you know, tick in the box, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, I guess the shooting part was not too bad. Like, everyone struggles a little bit at the start, but I've always been a decent shot, so it wasn't something I was overly concerned about. I think your stalks are very difficult, your live fire stalks, because someone's looking, you know, you're being observed by a trained sniper already. And you've got what you'd say is a reasonably small arc to be in for, you know, 10 guys. So you can just have a bad day. So, you know, you want to get in there quick and early. You know, you want to sneak around and get in early because all the good spots are going to get taken up. So, and you could just have a bad day and just run out of time, or, you know, maybe get lost. I think my first stalk, I was standing on this hill sort of looking for the observer, and I was like, what the hell? And I turned around and he was behind me. He had his back to me. I was like, oh shit. So I've crept back around the side and got back in within the arc. But all the other snipers could see me just standing above him on this hill, like looking around. And so you can just have a bad day, or your nav can be off a little bit. And, you know, you only got four live fire stalks to qual in, and you got to get 3 out of the 4. If not, you're done.
So did you, with that, do you have, like, obviously you've got snipers that are assessing you and that. Do they give you pointers and tips on what you should do, what you should look for, and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, so they do give lessons. Like, the lessons were pretty thorough. There just wasn't as much emphasis on, I guess, coaching and a few things like that. Like, it was just, the bare minimum, and which was not a bad way to do it. We got some really good guys out of it. But then, you know, there's some guys that, you know, if you just give them a little bit more coaching, they would have got across the line as well. So later on, when we were supervisors, it changed from a sink or swim to a, you know, we already know that these are good guys. Like, let's not put them through the ringer. Let's make sure they can shoot and get their eye in for sniping. And still, you know, not all of them would pass. Like, sometimes they couldn't get their eye in for sniping. Or how to do those type of stalks. They just didn't have it in them, that type of thing, or they were unlucky. But, you know, we really change it to giving them their best chance rather than just going, oh, good luck, like, see ya.
So, for you, without giving away too much detail of secrecy, and so does your sniper, works in alongside your assault teams and all that sort of on tag, or like if you can answer that, or
yeah, yes and no. Yes and no. There's different jobs that need to be done earlier and later, and that one's a little bit difficult to answer.
That's
the CT stuff.
That's
a lot of capability. Sometimes you might work within it, but other times you're doing a whole heap of other sneaky peeky.
Stuff.
So,
that's and I knew
it's a hard one.
It's a hard one to answer. Yeah, no, I totally get it, mate. So tell me now, you deploy again. So in 2011, you're on your third trip, and this time as part of the sniper team. And what was your mindset at this point? Because something had happened for you and at home, and how were you mentally at this point?
Welcome, loyal listeners of True Blue Conversations. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Australian Warfighter Coffee. Veteran owned and run, driven by a simple yet powerful motto: people over profit. Every dollar goes towards supporting veterans and first responder charity groups. Head on over to AustralianWarfighters.com and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Because let's face it, any other coffee is just brown sadness water. Now, let's get on with the show.
Yeah, I sort of went in a little bit rattled. One, because I had a daughter, had just been born, so she was only 6 or 7 weeks old, and that changed something in me deep inside. I was like, oh shit, I've actually got like responsibilities. We'd lost a few guys in 2010, like particularly the chopper crash and things like that. And then leading up to that trip, we were losing, guys as well. And also our mission set had changed. So we know now we're doing the big DEA drug jobs. We're doing the really big hard charging direct action tasks, and we're taking casualties. So at this point, you start to think about, you just go in. But at the same time, like our team and section was just rock solid. Like you couldn't have asked for a better team. So that is like gives you that sort of and like I said before, if you keep that team preservation mindset and not self-preservation mindset, you're good to go. But yeah, it does rattle you. And when I first got there was a big Taliban attack. I hadn't been outside the wire yet, but they'd done it on a election campaign that was at a school and blown up a whole lot of kids, and they sent us down to the hospital to help out on mass cas, and seeing a truckload of kids turn up with all their jaws and arms blown off and things like that, and told to triage them in a car park, and you've suddenly got your own kid at home, you start thinking, Jesus Christ, I don't know if I've still got this in me. But then you do your first job and you realise, this is still deep in me, we've got this. And by this stage too, we're starting to anticipate the enemy's tactics. We're starting to get a really good read on how they do things, and particularly my team commanders and some of and our team were really good at picking where they were going to go, and so we let them have it on a lot of our operations and got really good results.
So you mentioned that you started to work with the DA and you were doing these really big direct assaults and like the drug labs, and what was that like? And 2nd Commando was well established in Australia now. And what was that like working alongside the Americans and the DA, like the DEA doing the drugs and the, attacking, like, because I recently had Muzz Turner on and he said it was all leading up to this was, and for you, is that like, because you were there in 07, you were there in 09, was that the same felt for you, that this had been the big lead up to what we were actually 100%. Starting to, affect the battle space?
Yeah, and now we're being used, like we've turned into something else. We've gone away from a battalion, a commando battalion, and we're turned into our own special operations regiment in its own right. We've got the capability, we've got the skill sets, and now we're doing the actual job profiles that we should be doing. Everything had led to this point, and it was being recognised that we were the ones suitable for it. But prior to that, I'd, every so often I'd look over the fence at Perth and see what they're doing, and still wonder whether, is that like, should I have gone there or not? But by the time we hit 2011, you couldn't have asked for better jobs. Like, we're just doing all the high sort of profile and those big hard hitting jobs. And I really, we were away then. Like Muzz would have said, like, we were just turning and burning. The sniper teams were out in the field for 3 days prior, doing target shrinkage and stronghold shrinkage, making sure we knew where the bad dudes were, then calling in assault force, and then we'd get back and one of the other teams would have half our orders written up for us. We'd eat, write, finish our orders, jump on a bird that night and go hit a DA target or multiple targets at night. So working with the Yanks was great. DA guys were great. The USMC pilots that we used for our nighttime hits were great. We spent most of our time on the Super Hueys as snipers. So they were just gunning and, you're just standing on skids, jumping off, running straight in through your door or wherever you're going. And, so that was cool as hell. And then, the DA daylight hits were less fun because you're just going in daylight and you've got the old Russian...
The element of surprise isn't there.
Yeah, and they're the Russian Mi-17s, But with State Department pilots, Yank pilots have been in some... One guy was a Cobra pilot from Vietnam, like old dude, and, I'd run Little Birds for Blackwater, and so you got some really skilled dudes, and so you're getting shot in and off target and then blowing everything up and shooting everything and so having a good time, mostly. You're really hitting some big targets and getting good results.
So for you at that point, you mentioned that, you're starting to use the helicopters a lot more, fly into your targets, and so were you using back in 2009, was the choppers, were they starting to roll in for you, or was it?
Yeah, just at the tail end we started to use them.
Yeah.
But we sort of weren't doing the job profiles that really needed them yet. Then 2010, I don't know what happened then. So Alpha Company were in there and maybe Charlie or someone. So whatever they did then really changed. Obviously the unit changed back home, but whatever work they put in then really changed it and set us up well for 2011. When we'd hit the ground running and it was all fun and games, and back at midnight for ice cream after you've just knocked 3 big Taliban targets, and just big gunfights, heaps of fun, blowing heaps of stuff up. So and the choppers were required to travel that far, and even then we'd have to stage out of Bastion and other bases just because of how far it was from TK, or use no one wanted to use them, but use the fucking Ospreys if we had to. So, it was good.
So for you, how long was that trip? And did you guys post in after, as you mentioned earlier, Todd Langley was killed over there, and also Brett Wood? Did you roll in after that?
Yeah, straight after that. So they were leading. So going in after that, they took, I think, 3 KIA in 6 weeks or something like that. So, it was, you're it's a bit unnerving, and, you're going straight into those same exact places. But, as the threat increased, so did you, you can say that you get a little bit rattled or whatever, but, you're then more cognizant of, I need to do my job as best as possible. There's that blasé-ness that sort of goes out the window. We'd all done the cool SF stuff, and I say cool is in quotes, air quotes, as in, we've fought in shorts and we fought in, T-shirts, backwards facing baseball caps, and done all that type of stuff and got that out of our systems. But now it's sleeves rolled down, cam cream all the way up through your face, through your hair, bush hats, maybe plates, armoured plates, maybe not, and everything's wired, super tight. You're a professional force, and now you're acting like one as well. Okay, you did that. You got the fun stuff off your chest, but now and you're slick as hell. So I think, I think that was a big change in how we operated. And when you're doing all those things and doing everything to those 1%ers and doing everything right, it sort of negates some of the fear factor or thinking too much about the casualty sort of rate. And 2011 was the only trip for Bravo Company to not take a KIA, which was good. We got close. We had a fair few people shot, but and blown up. But it was a good trip.
So for you, you mentioned that like you had, so you knew Todd Langley, like you'd served with him in one area.
Yeah. Yep.
And his death, how did that affect you personally? And also, and how did his death and Brett's death affect the regiment?
Yeah, I think it rattled everyone, like both well-known characters. I didn't know, like I'd served with Todd, but I didn't know him that well at 1 or at 2, to be honest. And I didn't know Brett Wood that well. Like, we would have hung out on Anzac days or whatever.
Yep.
We sort of had similar circles of friends. But yeah, taking that many casualties in a quick, like, because there was Ron
Robson.
Yeah,
yep.
So he was the first of those 3, I believe. So, taking 3 casualties in that quick, succession, like, it's felt by everyone.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Because every second week now you're doing a funeral leading up to your deployment, and you're seeing, like, kids crying over their dad or their wives crying. You're like, Jesus, like, fucking hell.
And for you, like, you as you say, you've got your daughter, you've got
Yep.
things at home now, so it's getting more real. As you say, in the earlier days, when you didn't have those responsibilities, you were a little bit like not carefree, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
Like the care factor wasn't as tight as what it would have been in that 2011 trip.
So like just not as loosey goosey. Like you're tired, you sit down, plonk your ass down for a rest, and instead of just sitting where you sit, you go, you know what, I might just move in behind that rock, or I might have another double check, another 360 around to see what mountains, if someone can hit me from, if they pop up there. Like, you just start to become a bit more cognizant of, maybe one casual look down that re-entrant isn't enough. Like, have a second look, have a real good look, sit there and monitor it. Plus, like, now your teammates have got kids too, right? Like, they're in the same position as you. We're all in about the same sort of time of in our lives, so you don't want to see their kids without a dad as well. So it's that team preservation. And
I think Muzz said it really well in his podcast a couple of weeks ago that it was came out, and he said you got used to the work that you guys were doing. He said you actually just got used to leaving a flash drive on your pillow of your final messages, all that sort of stuff. And he's like, when you're back here in Australia, he's like, you just get accustomed to waiting for the phone to go off of, all right, we've, another guy's been killed or another. And he said it's a really strange world to live in at that point. And you look back now and you think, yeah, actually, that for you probably would have been the same. Like, that was just the normal. Yeah,
it was very a bit of pressure. Like, the phone would ring like at an odd time, maybe 9 o'clock at night. And you'd see it's either a private number or maybe one of the boys' number, and you're like, fuck, this isn't going to be good. And like, they go, hey, just so you know, such and such has been KIA or whatnot. And you live this weird lifestyle of like, just this pressure and you sort of don't know at the time, like you're young and capable, but afterwards, like, I think when the foot comes off the gas, you start to think about it a little bit more, and you're like, fuck, that's not normal the way that we lived. Like, and even our wives, like, I think it was in 2011 or 2013, we lived in a circle of units sort of thing, and the buzzer went off at about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night to someone to come into the property, and it was our buzzer, and I was overseas, and my wife, she just immediately went, 9:30 at night, this is it, like, this is the death letter, this is a death call.
Yep.
And she ran to the bathroom, sort of like shook her hair back, like, like put on a like appropriate shirt or something, and like tried to like splash water on her face and calm herself down, and then went and answered the door, and it was like the next door neighbours had ordered pizza or something, and it was just he'd pressed the wrong button, but like, and she tells you that story, and you just sort of don't realise what pressure they were under either. Like, for her to automatically think, well, this is it, like, because she's seen, like, she knew some of the guys that died, like, we used to party together, like Scott Palmer and stuff like that. We were all good mates, and so it wears down on them, and you go, geez, that's not a normal reaction. Normal reaction is like, who the hell's pressing the buzzer? Or the pizza man's pressed the wrong buzzer. But her first reaction was like, this is it, this is the call. And then she sort of, rang me in tears, and I think I was still an AMAB. I don't even think I got into country yet. I'm like, all right, just settle down, like, but you can tell it's a high pressure
But I think too, like you say, it's a really good point you touch on there, is that the families, like what they went through while you guys were doing what you were doing, like it was your job, and really good point to touch on that. Yeah, the pressure on the families back home, and of like you're serving your country, and you know, as I've had previous guests on the podcast have said, that their greatest sacrifice was to their family.
Oh,
you know?
100%.
And for you to be the same, and
Yep.
and you know, like as you say, just a really key point to touch on that. Yeah, it's not those. It wasn't that normal. Like what you were doing just wasn't normal. Like that.
No, that's right. And definitely the sacrifice to the family, and the pressure they were under is huge. Like it's just, it's really hard. Like even my daughter, she only was around for a few years while I was in the ADF, but even afterwards she suffered like a bit of anxiety around me going away and stuff like that. Huge pressure. And then it's not normal. And like we used to work hard, come home, play hard, party hard, then like head back into the fray again, and just like just this revolving cycle. And we loved it. Like we really truly did love it, and it was important work, but like we liked it. But then afterwards, you're like, oh, it's probably a little bit crazy. Like you should have just had a bit of a breather at some point. And the psych said that to me towards the end of my tours. She's like, you've deployed every second year for a decade. Do you think about like a training posting or something? And I was like, training posting? That sounds like shit.
Yeah. And for you at that point, like as you say, you deployed every second year for a decade, and when you joined the army back in 2000, did you ever imagine that you would be where you were at that point?
No, I don't think so. Like it was pretty crazy life to be living. For some reason, I'd always dreamt of going to Afghanistan. Like I'd read a book or watched Rambo too many times or something. But I was happy I was there, but it was a little bit hard to believe. Like you're living this suddenly, like you watch your Navy SEALs movies and stuff, and obviously that romanticizes it a bit. But at the same time, you're suddenly living this weird life where you are banging it in, coming back, jumping on the phone, talking to your wife, eating ice cream in the mess, and then next day you're planning and you're camming up and going in, and then you're doing a sniper mission and you're killing like insurgents non-stop, and your planning's right on point, and you're just like dropping these commanders and doing like good stuff, and like seeing a difference made on the battle space. And then you're living a bit of a wild life, and you head home and do CT and do all the sexy stuff, and it was good. It was a good time, but it's a young man's game, that's for sure. Like,
and you're still young, mate. What are you talking about? You're still...
My knees and back probably haven't heard that, but yeah.
And so you come back from your third deployment in 2011, and then in 2012 you were part of raising a free fall capability. And you mentioned in the podcast that you didn't like parachuting back in the early days. So what was that like for you, raising this, and talk me through the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so we knew we were going to raise it, and when I say raise it, there was a few people already military freefall qualified in the unit, but this was the first course designated to Commando rather than a mixed course of SA or predominantly course of SASR. And so we're going to raise it. We had the lead on it, and I was not overly fond of the idea, but free falls are a lot different to static line. Static line at 1,000 feet is very daunting when the ramp opens. When you're up at 10,000 and things like that, it's a little bit easier. Like your mind can't perceive the threat, I don't think. And we'd done some wind tunnel time in the UAE. I think that had set us up well for flying. But in a weird turn of events, due to some of the close calls we had in helicopters and some crashes and landings and stuff like that, I had developed a bit of a fear of a ground rush and landing in planes and helicopters just out of nowhere. I don't like the word triggered, but something in my brain deep down does not like landing in planes and helicopters because of some of the incidents we had on the 2011 trip. So it actually, in the weird turn of events, helped me jump from an airplane. I would rather jump and have everything be in my own control than land in a goddamn aircraft. So weirdly, I was not too bad at it. And actually started to enjoy it.
Yeah, right. And For you, how's that now? Are you still? How's the landing with planes now? Is it
It's
eased?
lessened off.
Yeah, it's lessened off.
Like I just developed a fear of flying. Hey, it just came out of nowhere. Weird way to express itself. Like out of all like the stuff I've seen and done, like that's probably the biggest sort of thing that is just this weird and illogical sort of fear of flying. That then. You know what? If that's how the stress is going to express itself, well, and that's the only way, well, so be it. Like, it's not the worst. I just have to force myself to get on planes. But
I think too, though, like you mentioned before, it was the high tempo and maybe just as you say, that high tempo. Like you were, in planes, you were in choppers, you were, you're in, like in and out, in and out, in and out. So maybe it was something from that, or like. Yeah,
well, we had we nearly got shot down a few times, and with RPGs and heavy machine guns, and we sort of crashed one night, like blew all the wheels off the CH-47 and nearly slammed into the other one. Like it was a nearly catastrophic. Like if you see the video footage, like two Chinooks miss each other by like a bee stick. It would have been.
Oh wow!
60 guys wiped off the face of the map. Like we would have been done. And it was really bad. Like so, anyone that was in that helicopter that night remembers it pretty well.
Yeah.
And probably had similar feelings to it. So we all went careering down a mountainside after that, and had to get stable again. And it was funny. The guys on the chopper on the ground thought they were in contact when they got off, because the heat from their chopper was setting off our flares, the heat-seeking flares.
Yeah,
on ours.
right.
And it was, and as we were sideways over the top of them, and we were firing flares into them as they were running off, and they were like, "Fuck, we're in contact. Where are we getting shot from?" And then they looked up, and it's like middle of the night, and all they can see is a CH-47 with wheels falling off it, sideways, like over the top of theirs, just going down the side of this mountain. And they were like, Jesus.
Yeah, right.
And so we tried to get back to base, and it was just shaking itself apart, and they turned back and they put it down as gentle as anything with no wheels. Like God knows how they did it, but they broke the ramp off, the wheels were busted, like the wheels come up inside the aircraft and stuff. And I think that one definitely had something to do with it. But I remember looking out first, and I was like, fuck, we're coming in fast. And then I saw the loadie get up screaming too fast, and he dived up the back, and then we slammed in. And
so you have night vision on that stuff?
Yeah. I just remember seeing the ground rush going, geez, this looks a bit fucking fast. And then I thought, he's not landing. And no, he was trying to land all right. We didn't use those pilots again. But,
understand it, mate. Like, geez. And, like you say, you develop that, I'd rather be in control of my own destiny, and immortality, as you say. Like it's like you want to survive, and so you overcome that hate of
Well, it was when I got home, we flew up to see to Townsville, see family, and I was looking out the windows, we're landing in the plane, and then suddenly I just started sweating bullets and ripped the seat, and my wife's like, what's going on here? And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I don't know. I feel like I can't breathe. And
right.
Sort of realised there's something not right there. And but anyway, the team's now been recalled from leave to do freeform. And I was like, oh, well, one in, all in, just like suck it up sort of thing. And, I think everyone makes fun of each other too, and lightens the mood and has a bit of gallows humour. So,
The old alpha males, mate. Oh, come on, mate. Come on.
Yeah. So it was, And like as much as we take the piss out of each other, like everyone's got each other's back too. Like if someone's like not, something's going on and not picking up in a certain area, like guys will pick up the slack. Not forever, but like if you've just got something going on, like, and they'll make sure that you're set. Like, there's no problems. Like if they know that you're seriously something needs to be picked up, they'll sort of look after you. If it's sort of semi-serious, I'll just tell you to fucking suck it up and
a bag of concrete,
make some jokes. Fucking tell you that parachute doesn't look packed properly or something like that.
Oh, geez, that'd be the worst for you, mate. So, how are you mentally? Because you're getting prepared to deploy again for the fourth time.
Yep.
In 2013, you'd mentioned that you'd had that close call.
Yep.
How are you mentally at this point, getting ready to deploy in 2013?
So we've got now. So like every time you sort of, you get, there's a threat or fear starts to raise its sort of head, but at the same time you're offsetting it by experience. So like Bravo Company at this point, really has a strong skeleton crew of those very first guys from 2006 prior sort of thing. So you're more confident. The threat's gone up. They're giving you bigger jobs because you're more capable, but and you are more capable. So, and you've got the skill sets behind you. You've got a good crew. You've put the Rio through, so you know what guys you're getting. They're good guys. So, so mindset's not too bad. It's it's mostly pretty good. And I had a really good 2011 trip, so that reset me. Like those 2009 trip wasn't so good. We lost some guys, and but the 2011 not losing anyone, and then just absolutely hammering it. Like our two sniper teams absolutely hammered the Taliban down, and got some really good shots on them. Got to practice every sniping skill, clearing tunnels, clearing Taliban compounds. Like we really got amongst it. And, even the psych asked me at the end of my, you got to do a post-op to leave the country. And she's like, oh, you seem really upbeat compared to maybe some of your other ones, like looking at my comments. She's like, what's the difference, do you think, between this trip and other trips? And I was like, oh, this will sound real crazy if I say it out loud. But I just actually got to, just kill a whole heap of bad dudes, hey? And she's like, oh. And I'm just like, not in a crazy way, but when you're just getting shot at or bombed and you're not seeing too much, it starts to wear you down a bit. But now you know and can anticipate where they're going. It's like this game of chess, which you're beating them at, and not beating them at in a little bit, you're beating them hands down. So it was really rewarding trip. So it sort of set me up for a good 2013 trip.
So let's talk about that 2013 trip, mate, because what role was for the 2nd Commando Regiment in Afghanistan and Task Force 66 in 2013, and how had the battle space changed during, or how was it changing? And because, as we all know, it was starting to wind down, and as quick as it was turned on, did you guys feel that the tap was turning off really quick? And how was that trip compared to all the other trips you'd been on?
Yeah, I'd say it was less kinetic. We had to have more partner force out the gate. So, I feel, and, there's some military commentators feel the same, that during 2011, when Obama was trying to win votes, he announced we're going to draw down, win or lose 2013, we're going to start a drawdown. And the Taliban's mentality changed. They're like, well, shit, we can wait them out. It's like saying to Nazi Germany in 1941, win or lose, come 1942, we're going to leave and not bother fighting this war anymore. No matter where we get to, they would have just gone, okay, well, we'll just wait you out and
till 1945,
we'll just take everything, right? Yep. So, he did that, and we were punishing. People say you can't out-kill an insurgency or an idea or whatever. And I'm going, well, we were doing it. These bad dudes, we were clearing entire valleys of them, and we're going back later, and there was crickets. There was, ints coming in, still no enemy back there. And we had them, and a lot of units had them on the ropes in a lot of different places, the insurgency. But now that he's announced that, win or lose, we're leaving in 2013. So their tactics change, and they start to slow down a bit and disengage as fast, and so we really had to lock them into a fight. So it was a little bit more difficult to lock them into a fight. It wasn't a big firefight. They'd try to get out of there and consolidate because we were leaving, right? So the tactics changed a bit. We still were doing our direct action tasks. Mainly we're trying to get our partner force up to speed to be able to do these things on their own, which was difficult. And so that was sort of our main focus, is to get that, but still get as much Taliban and as much drugs off the street as we could.
So you're still fighting in Helmand at this stage?
Yeah, yep. Still Helmand and up on some of those eastern border areas, and some different places. So Shawali Kot, all those type of nasty little places that we get ourselves into, and still doing the similar sort of jobs, doing a bit of shaping operations as well. Let's go in there and just poke them a little bit, not get engaged, see what they do, where they go to, and then come back out. And, I think Cam Baird, when he would lose his life, was a bit of that, the end result of a shaping operation. We've been touching them up a little bit to see where they'd go. And then once they'd been consolidated in the end there, that's when the commando company would launch, or the parts of that company would launch and hit a big enemy target. So a lot of shaping operations, still those direct action tasks. But yeah, you're getting less time on the ground. It was less kinetic just because you're getting less time on the ground because you had to have, I think, 70% partner force, so like 70% Afghans and 30%, commandos.
Right.
So it's getting tougher and tougher to get out the door.
Is there any missions that stand out for you, like mission profiles that you did on that trip that stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few, and I talk about one on another podcast, but where we sort of snuck some guys in overnight on quad bikes and vehicles into a desert to surround this area, and we come landing in on the helicopter force the next morning, and there was about 50, 70 sort of cars full of drugs and guns. It was a guns and drug market for the Taliban, and with 3 sort of big drug targets, and we all swept in and stuff like that, and so it was pretty good. Our helicopter started taking a lot of fire, so we overshot our thing by about 2 kilometres and had to run across this billiard table, and and then, the assaulters, they're off at a rapid rate. They're lighter, and we had bogged down, me and another sniper, and we're sort of strolling along, like, we'll catch them in the village sort of thing, running a bit, strolling a bit, and we had a guy give us a good crack there out in the open. I had nowhere to go, so I ended up just standing there, and there was this farmer, like, just with his head over this berm, and he's staring straight at me, like, an Afghan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's where the fire's come from. It's got to be him. Like, because he's like peeking over the berm at me, and I'm like, it's him. And I put my crosshairs right on him. I'm like, the next time he moves, like, he's done. Like, waiting for him to shoot at us again. And then suddenly took rounds again. We're like, shit, where is this? And I see just from behind him this guy move in the bushes. And the farmer, he's just trying to keep eye contact with me, right? Like, which they typically do. They just, like, they want your eye contact. Typically, they're the one to make themselves known. Hey, I'm here. Like, just don't get too itchy, trigger happy. And so I'd like raise my sights a bit, and I shoot old mate and put him down, and then we get over. And it's funny, I see the Afghan, he's pointing to something on the ground, and I'm like, oh, what is it, sort of thing. Like, it's all hand gestures at about 150 metres, and he reaches down slowly and he pulls up a shovel, because I've still got my crosshairs on him, I think he's dodgy, and he just pointing at his shovel, and then he points, gives me the thumb, like, hey, I want to get out of here. And I'm like, oh yeah, give him the thumbs up. Gives me the thumbs up back. I'm sure he didn't know what it meant, but off he strolls, sort of thing. And then we achieved the break in there, and there's just cars going everywhere. They're getting collected by the boys snuck out in the desert in the quad bikes. We've got our ISR went down, so our pred, so we didn't have a lot of feed on the enemy compounds, which is a bit annoying. Like, we're starting to, because we're taking some big firefights, taking these compounds, and so then we'd have a Huey who would ring up and go, I've got 4 cars corralled out here in the desert, who's free? And 2 dudes would go, yeah, I'm free. And then it'd land at the back door of a compound, pick 2 dudes up, and they'd scoot out there and clear the cars and whatnot, and zip tie up any prisoners it was just a full, pretty loose, not loose, but video game-ish type thing, anything goes. And and I spoke about it on this other thing about this is where we saw that this girl shoved onto the roof by one of the Taliban insurgents on our target compound, which is pretty unnerving. And I used some creative and some specific shooting just to create some effects to get her off that roof, I guess, and planted some rounds on a wall not too far away. And obviously having a sniper rifle, it's an easy thing to do with those precision fires. And and then she tried to get off the roof, and we watched her get shoved back up, and she was pointing out all our positions to somebody, and obviously we find out later it's to escape, and where they armed IEDs at the front door, and she was only young, about 9-10 years old, and it was pretty, we were pretty weren't really emotionally driven when we would go into a firefight. So, they either meet the ROE and it's a target, a valid target, and you shoot it, or it's a human being going about its normal job. So you're not really getting too emotionally indebted, because I think if you do get emotionally driven, that's when mistakes are made. So I think a lot of people would just be like, it's a target, it's not a target sort of thing. But where this one, we saw this girl shoved back onto the thing, and now guys are starting to get pissed. Like, that's the first time I've seen sort of anger, like, oh, you son of a bitch. Like, when we get in there, there's going to be hell to pay. Like, anyway, so I put in another precision round off to the side, and she, you know, because she had tears streaming down her face, and now she's dived off. So we finally make our way in there. They've escaped to the next building. I think we might catch them up later. But, you got all these hard charges now that are pissed off and in there. And but we always used to carry lollies and pencils in our pockets. So we, find the girl in the red dress and we're giving it to her and stuff like that. But then we, started taking heavy fire, took a lot of compounds, had to use, as we couldn't have the ISR to tell us where the enemy were, and had to fight back a fair few Ks through the village to get to the last target. We were running low on time. We decided to use some enemy cars that they didn't need anymore and to move across the desert. And so we scooted across to the last target, and lo and behold, out the front of that was enemy meeting, doing their planning meeting, about 20 Taliban out the front. And we drove straight up to them, like they just had no idea that it was us in the white cars, and engaged them. The first car started engaging them about 20, 30 metres, I think, got out, did big handbrake turn, and the boys jumped down and it was on. Right. So, took that last target and then off onto the choppers. So gigs like that was just one of my favourite ones, but they're all sort of very similar to that.
You did some PSD for the Chief of Army as well, yeah. Well, what was that like, mate?
Well, he wasn't my favourite Chief of Army. I don't think he was anyone's favourite.
No.
Yeah, so a lot of the guys went out, and instead of bringing guys from Australia, because it was a bit lower tempo, they decided to use guys in country. And most of the guys went out to the UAE to do all the planning and bring him in. I decided with one of the other snipers to stay in TK to do the planning of that leg there, so we could piggyback onto the other jobs, do the cool jobs at the same time, which was fun. And plus, I didn't want to get my head out of the game. I wanted to stay with my head in the game. Like, if the UAE, you're suddenly in shopping centres and stuff like that now, and it sort of messes with your head a bit, so I wanted to stay in. It was good, like good learning experience. But yeah, it was just it was him. Like, I took him across, and I think to our compound after he'd seen all the other things. And it was a good learning experience for myself as well, like planning that and working in with other hierarchy, and being like a corporal, telling, majors or things like, no, we're not doing that, like it's unsafe, and like having like operational command, I guess, as a sort of SME to a certain degree. So it was good for me. But I remember him going over the compound, and I think Perth and our guys had been out on a job and both been in good contacts that morning. And he started off his speech with something like, to the words of something like, the era of the brute is over, or something like that, and started to give us this is the first time we've seen this PC type culture come in, and we're like, era of the brute is over. Like, these guys have just been smashing doors down, blowing through walls this morning, getting shot at and killing dudes. Like, if the brutes aren't here, there's going to be some problems. None of these guys would have walked out this morning if they weren't that.
Yep. Softly is not going to work.
Yeah, and I just saw the faces on the boys change, east and west, and I'm just like, man, I'm going to have to intervene against my own guys. Like, they're going to kill this little chicken, like this little scrawny bloke. So, it wasn't my favourite gig, but it was a learning experience. So, yeah.
And you mentioned, so you served alongside Cam Baird, VCMG, and as you mentioned, Cam was killed in action in Afghanistan whilst serving, where he was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for his actions that day. And he was killed, and what memories do you have serving alongside Cam that you believe we should know about him?
I think, like, it's a sad thing that Cam passed. There's no doubt about it. He was a good guy. He was a good operator. And, obviously, I'm good friends with the family as well.
Yep.
But I guess not to feel sorry for him. Like, Cam was, like, he loved what he did. Like, up until he wasn't here anymore, he would have loved exactly what he was doing. Like, it would have been a smile. Like, he was happy, and he was like, he could do his job real well. And he did what he did on the day because, like, they were in a tough spot, and that's just the way sometimes that things worked out. Would rather that not have happened. But, you know, don't feel sorry necessarily. You can be empathetic and think about things, but like, make no mistake, he loved what he was doing. Like, he's the guy on the chopper that's like stomping his feet, like, you know, firing the other boys up, grabbing them by the vest and shaking them around. And, you know, I saw him charge positions once, him and his team, just on foot sprinting at like Taliban that were above them, elevated position in the mountains, that had the right, like, tactically should have been able to shoot those boys and finish them off. And these guys were ditching their guns and sprinting. Like, the guys just sprinted at them off this chopper, and it just sent the fear of God into them. Like, they were terrified. Like, PKM gunners, they should have had the upper hand, and like 5 or 6 guys just fucking hauling ass up there, and they're just like, oh, fuck this, I'm out of here. Like, you know, I think those are sort of the best memories of Cam. Is like, you know, yeah, it's a sad thing, but he loved what he was doing, and he was a hard charger, and he's doing what he was supposed to do.
He went out the way he was supposed. Because I know a few boys have spoken about him and said, yeah, he was just the ultimate professional. He just led from the front, and he was like, I remember speaking to the late Nick Hill about it, and Nick said, he goes, mate, that was how that warrior was supposed to go out. He was not supposed to go out any other way. Like, it would have been great for him to be, you know, he still had a lot to give to the regiment and that sort of thing, and for his family, but he wasn't supposed to die an old man. Like, that was not his thing.
And like, a good example of that too is like, you know, when they announced we were going to war in Iraq for ISIS, the first thing that came out of like the older sort of dude's mouth is, oh, Cam will be pissed wherever he is. Like, we're going again, because, you know, after 2013 we were all kicking stones thinking it was over, right? We're not going anywhere for a long time, and then suddenly it popped back up, and the first thing people were saying is, oh, Cam's going to be pissed, he'll miss this one. So like, that's the type of dude he is.
And for you, so, you know, great memories of, you know, working alongside Cam. And mate, I want to go into the thoughts on how Afghanistan ended up, and for you personally, because you did 4 tours over there, and Australia's achievements from our involvement and our commitment. And I want to dive into what your thoughts are and how you look back on your time in Afghanistan. Yeah,
like, I look back on it, had fond memories more than the bad ones. So like, I don't have... Yeah, like, I had a good time with my mates doing stuff, like, and doing the job we were meant to. You ask most SF operators, I think they'd say Afghan ended the way it was going to end. The way it ended. I think everyone sort of saw that coming. Like, well, we did. Maybe strategic commanders didn't. But, you know, as soon as Obama opened his mouth and said, win or lose, we'll withdraw in 2013, the war was lost. And I don't say lost because, like, meaning like we actually lost the war because we absolutely flogged the piss out of the Taliban. But we sort of just abandoned the war. Like, we just sort of went, oh, well, this is a waste of time now. Like, they're not engaging because he's going to pull us everyone out. Like, I think if we kept going another year or two at 2011 without saying, even if our plan was to leave in 2013 but without telling them, I think we would have had them on their knees and the Afghans be able to take over. That's just my opinion and how I vibe it out. You know, also, we didn't have a lot of face time with villagers or civilians, so we were there for the worst of the worst. So, you know, you'll hear somebody say, oh, they're just farmers with guns, like with a 303, maybe in your spot, but that's not our war. Like, SF war was the worst of the worst, and we were after bad guys. And, you know, the CIA after 9/11 was, their whole mantra was to never let it happen again. And if we're tying those bad dudes up over on a foreign shore instead of them crumping off in buses in London, I'm quite happy. 100%. And I think most of our guys are quite happy to keep a war ticking over, to let INT get a handle on Western security. Like, how are we going to track these guys? How are we going to stop this from happening again? And if that war took it 10 years to get our handle on it, and I think we do have a handle on it, now, also be it. Like, we stopped direct attacks back here in the Western society via like holding some of those wars in the Middle East. They didn't have to travel, countries to kill civvies at a Grande concert. They just had to travel one country to come kill us, you know. And so I see that as a win. We tied them up there. Happy about that. We're fighting the worst of the worst. We didn't do any of the rebuilding, and I spoke about this to someone recently. Like, maybe you see some guys get torn up about it, and you're like, well, maybe MTF that were rebuilding schools and stuff like that, maybe dudes like that might have been a bit more tied emotionally and indebted to the mission, whereas us is just as many bad guys as you can get and get them good. And I was happy, like I said, most guys are happy to just take them off the map, keep them off our shores, keep them off Western cultures and Western countries' shores.
Absolutely. I think that's a really key point you touch on, mate, is that, freedom is not free. And like we're recording this today at beautiful Sunshine Coast in Queensland, free of bombs going off, free of, we can walk the street, not a problem, because of what you guys did and went over and protected us. And mate, we can do that now. Like, you allow us to have that freedom, and I think that's a really good point you touch on, that if you kept it away from the Western world and you did your job really.
Obviously, it was a massive blow on 9/11, and there would have been groups ready to run off the back of that success, and plenty of little groups, other groups popped up. And it still happened, but we still tied a lot up, and there's plenty of int that backed our missions to say that we did tie direct people up that were going to directly have hostilities against civilian targets in the Western countries. And I think too, just having a military too capable of fighting, like it's not a reason to go to war, but if you're looking for the positives, keeping the war off our front and over somewhere else, and having a military that's got some experience. Now, people say that experience has left the military, which it is, but lessons were learnt, and TTPs were born out of that, and TTPs that they're using in infantry everywhere. We know how to get logistically how to run a war now, all the way from Australia to get a foothold somewhere else and do all these things. We just probably didn't have that. There were so many teething issues in the early days, to get fresh food, but we have that ability now. So if something does go wrong somewhere, we can stand something up quickly. And those lessons, some are going to fade and not be learnt or be applicable, but a lot will be held on to.
Well, it's something that you mentioned before we started, mate, that it was the lessons learned. That, like you say, we'll keep moving forward shortly when you leave Afghanistan. But for you, we mentioned it that, at the unit now, the lessons that were learnt in combat that you learnt and had to learn, and the teething problems are now that they're so far advanced from from what you had to learn.
The unit is so far ahead of when I left. They are at the top, the very tip of the spear, and working with other units that are equal in their experience. And there is that fear factor that some of the newer guys or younger guys don't have that battlefield experience. But in one way, they haven't been tested individually, but in another way, like we talked about, the TTPs that came off the battlefield are rolled into their CQB courses. They've been given the answers. They didn't have to find out the question or work out the equation. They've been given the answers, and when they hit the ground running, they're in perfect shape to hit the ground on the next war. And I don't know what that'll look like, but we figured it out. We've given them extra TTPs, and I'm sure they'll figure it out real quick, and they'll develop their own TTPs. But
absolutely,
they're in good shape. So
absolutely. And like you say, lessons learned. And so you come back from your 2013 deployment, and then in 2014 you were part of TAG East as a sniper and the G20 summit. And what challenges did you face with the summit, if you had any?
It was just interesting more than anything, running. We obviously had to be prepared for it, but we also had to run security and sneaking around. And once again, probably something we can't talk too much about, but snipers had their part in it, and we were lurking around places, and everybody, other guys were stood to ready, and having the president out here and stuff like that. So it was a big deal. So so once again, tag has changed as well. We've done good workups, and we're doing all the cool stuff again, and now we're sort of being op tested in our own country, which is pretty cool. And just doing the sneaky peeky stuff. So it was fun. It was a good sort of hit out.
And so then you have the G20 summit, and then in 2015, as you mentioned, you deploy again as a sniper element into Iraq. And how is this different going to Iraq compared to your time in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so very different. It was just they decided to fight the war a different way, and that hinged on a lot of different things. Like there's secret reasons that we won't talk about, but also like keeping certain countries' influence out. Also, there was a bit of a civil war aspect to it, so you couldn't just wipe ISIS off the map without maybe a big retaliation, because ISIS being predominantly Sunni and stuff like that, and you didn't want the Shia to retaliate. If you had wiped them off the map, they might go a bit crazy as well. So it was a slow trickle-fed thing. We had to work around, like new laws were created. There's one side of that operation that we can't talk about, and leave that to the journos that want to try and leak it. And it was very, very niche sort of area, and 2 Commando had the lead on the Iraq campaign, which is good. We had primacy on this. Our concept of operations got up, and we had the lead. Perth didn't come until much later, when they just put in a couple of guys for JTAC, so it was good to have our own sort of operation run. And like I said, one side's still secret, and the other side of it was like training these guys and get them out the door, and then run the operations more remotely, and we had to think outside the box. And so it was less direct kinetic shooting than we would have liked. We were all ready to get amongst it, and as ISIS had advertised, they were the worst of the worst, and we wanted to sort of give it to them personally.
Yep.
That wasn't to happen for our trip. It just wasn't as kinetic, but we definitely took a fair few ISIS guys off the board by other means, and doing other type of work.
And how long was that deployment for you?
Man, I think that dragged out to like 7 months or something.
Yeah, right.
It was like there was no real end date. They were just like, it's somewhere around then. And we didn't have this thing called a forces agreement.
Yep.
So potentially if you shot someone, you could go to jail. So they had to take us over on diplomatic passports. So we sort of trickle-fed into country as well. We had these, whenever your passport was ready is when you deployed. So like some guys are there, some guys you turn up on a Thursday to deploy, and they're like, nah, not this Thursday, and you head back home for another week, and then like you turn up and they go, here's your passport, you're good to go. And you're like, all right, babe, I'm out, like sort of thing. So it was a weird deployment, but it was interesting though. It was a good one to sort of finish up on. If it were still like, I think if I'd stayed for another 1 or 2 rotations where they started to get a little bit more kinetic, it would have sucked me back in. But as it turned out, I sort of slowed down enough that I thought, and I'm young enough to make a change and try and give life on the outside a go. So I decided to do that in 2016.
Well, we'll talk about that now. So in 2016, you went to the Philippines, and then you made the decision to discharge. And how was that for you? Like, did you feel that after being in, like, serving for, you joined in 2000, 16 years, and majority of that over 10 years in Special Forces?
Yep.
Was the transition hard? And for you, was it hard to find purpose again once you discharged?
Yeah, I think it was a difficult decision, because I felt like an arsehole leaving my team. Like you just feel terrible. Like you can't explain it. It's just a gut shot. But so I felt bad for leaving, but I knew I had to give it a go. Like I really wanted to give it a go, and hence we moved to Brisbane as well. So because I knew if things get a little bit tough, it'd be too easy for me to walk back through the door and just go, put me back in, put me back in, coach. So and then I went to work with organisation and help them train in weapons and tactics and a few different things, another government organisation. So luckily for me, there was a few SF guys that they recruited from East and West, and also there was a lot of ex-army in there. So it was an easier transition than I'd say for some people, because you're still around some of those like-minded people. But yeah, it was interesting working in a public service type sector for sure. Like, I was just shocked that, you know, commander's intent didn't mean anything, and people could just do whatever they wanted and turn up late and just like, and still be able to carry a gun and just like, but just have a real shitty attitude, like low drive. I just hadn't been around like low drive individuals in a long time, and it was a bit of a shock. So
sort of like, as you say, and I've heard a few operators come on and say, yeah, sort of battalion, back to battalion, low drive, low, you know, like not taking anything away from the battalion, but yeah, some guys,
the battalions were fucking in hyperdrive compared to these blokes.
Yeah,
like,
right.
No, it was just, I won't name the organisation, but it was lackluster to be the, you know, like, and I still do work with, you know, SOCOM and the battalions now, and like, you know, and we spoke about it before, like battalions too these days are like, they're in, you know, I've only seen some of them, but like they are like sporty as hell these days too. Like they are got some good skill sets and doing some cool, like, you know, getting prepared and whatever, doing what they're supposed to be doing. But yeah, we're in good stead, I think. Like, people sort of shit can our army a bit because of the political culture, but I think they're the highly driven sort of and motivated people in the SF and, you know, the infantry in particular still exist. They're just waiting for this stuff to blow over and get back to their core job of fighting and get back into it. Maybe it's going to have to be a war to teach us our lesson. Hopefully not. But but the Australian Aussie spirit's still good and going.
Yeah.
They just got to lay low a little bit while fucking idiots have their turn in the limelight, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And for you, so in 2018, and you're still there now, you started working for a private LE and mill training company. And what do you do in this role now?
Yeah, so we work with we still work with government agencies like policing and ADF back here. Maybe supply some equipment and a bit of training on that. There's a whole other side of the business that that works in the VR type space and simulation space and things like that. And then there's another side of it where I will train where the US DoD is doing foreign military sales and building partner capacity programs. So yeah, wherever they have interests and wherever like, you know, that are okay with our DFAT as well, obviously. I end up going over there and training. And it's just equipment integration. It's not tactics or anything, but because I've had such a broad experience with different types of equipment, it's easy for me to either know it or learn it or get the right guys in to teach it. So, end up in a lot of interesting, cool places and see what's going on. There's usually like a Navy SEAL platoon or MARSOC platoon that you just wouldn't have thought would be there that's training these dudes, and they're like, why are you here? I'm like, mate, I don't know, but I'm teaching this bit of kit, and they're like, okay, like, we'll watch on then. And you're like, cool, yeah. So, it's been a good job. It's been fun. So, travel around.
And for you, obviously, John, you, as I said, you've served at the sharp end. Getting out, how are you mentally? Like, you're okay now? Like, you have any challenges and face any challenges that you, once you got out, or were you generally okay?
I'd say generally okay. Like, I think the wheels fell off the cart a little bit. Like, I don't know, you just felt different. Like, it just, like, felt, like, if you use the word rattled, like, I felt rattled for a good 6 months. Just the underlying sort of anxiousness, you know, particularly when I went to that first job afterwards, we won't mention law enforcement thing. I went in. I was sitting in the office, you know, and I'd never been in an office all day. Like, and I'm looking out through glass windows. There's no open air and stuff like that. And I'm sitting at a computer. I'm looking out through a window, and then all of a sudden I was like, "There's no air in here. I can't fucking breathe.
Yeah,
there's no air." Like I realised I hadn't been outdoors, and so you know, down the stairs, out the lift, out the doors, and I'm like, like not like a panic attack, but like a mini panic attack.
Yeah,
like it just
yeah.
felt like there was no oxygen in there anymore. And then I was out in the sun and outdoors, and I felt fine, you know. And I'm just like wasn't used to running around or like, you know, we did paperwork at work, but obviously if the chance was to go to the range or do something else, that's where we were. Like, and then all of a sudden you've been for 4 days enclosed in an office block. You're just like, Jesus Christ, I don't like this at all. This is shit. So, so it was a little bit difficult overcoming that. And now with this new job, and other little side jobs, hustles I have, like gets me out the door, gets that out of my system, and I come and work from home. So it's work remotely from home, which is cool.
Yeah, nice. So, and looking back, you know, you're in good shape, which is fantastic, mate. And for you, what are your plans going forward with your family and for you, career-wise?
Oh, excuse me, choking on flies. I plan on sticking with the company that I've got working with at the moment, and we'll continue on doing our thing. And just it's just that work-life balance now. Like, and you would have seen it like on Instagram. I sort of re-raised that. You know, get Doug Baird out hunting. We got a little SF crew up here that ex-SF crew that get out and about and have access to a particular place that we can hunt and camp with their families and that. Just bulk family time, doing the family grind, and then doing my little flyaway adventures, whether it be with this work or same stuff. I've jump on a few other gigs with some mates that do some counter poaching work in Africa, training up the rangers. So all of that sort of keeps the lid on you, and as long as you get outdoors and keep doing that, I think, I just keep chipping away the way I'm doing, I think, at the moment. Like,
awesome. And as you say, family time, giving back to, like you say, you know, like you mentioned throughout the podcast, you know, there was a time where your daughter was, you know, had that little bit of anxiety when you were away.
Yeah, definitely.
Just now saying to her, you know, Daddy's coming back, like he'll be here.
Like she never used to trust when I'd say, I'm only going for a short time, like 3 days. She used to call going away the long work, and she'd go, you know, is it the long work? And she'd be very anxious about it. Now she knows if it's 3 days, it's 3 days. She's not worried about it. But even little changes like that you see with your family, and like your missus not breaking down when the pizza guy buzzes the wrong fucking door. Like, you know, my son, he never had to put up with it. I was leaving the army when he sort of was getting born. So he's lucky for him, he's not had to put up with any of it. So just a cranky asshole dad, I guess now.
just sore in in back and knees.
Yeah.
All that time, mate, of carrying heavy packs and stop march.
Mate, I had to have like injections and injections and radio pulse frequency in my neck last week with day surgery and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah. Helmets and crashes and parachuting and 5 kilos on your neck all the time, I think it's starting to wear a few things out. But,
and you think, mate, back in the day when you're young and bulletproof, mate, you think, it's not gonna worry me. And then,
that's right. Like, you used to just fall over and bounce or something and just go, oh well. And people are like, are you okay? That doesn't look like you should be okay. And like, it's fine. And now, like, I don't think I'll go up the extra rung on that ladder in case I slip. I think I'll get back up. But so. No, it's not as dramatic, but
it's mate. As you say, you've I think getting older, mate. It's everyone says, don't wish your life away, and now you're
100%.
Enjoy the moment and every moment. And for you, mate, knowing what you know now and all that you've been through, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
One, he wouldn't listen, regardless of what I said. 2, I probably wouldn't have changed anything in the way that my path. Like, I was, pretty lucky. I could foresee when things were going to, at times to jump at something. But I mean, not paying attention at school. If I had copped a serious injury early on in my career, like I could have stuffed myself. So maybe doing a little bit better at school and getting to year 12, like I binned year 12 to join the army. Like, if anywhere along that road I'd hit a hard obstacle and hurt myself, like, it may have been unemployable. You don't know how bad. So probably done a little bit more, stuck through with my education. And for me personally, SF was the way to go, and I probably should have done it earlier, like trained and just backed myself earlier. But I learned everything. And everywhere I went, I learned stuff in 1 RAR, I learned stuff in 6 RAR. None of it was a waste of time. So it would be hard to change.
Well, it shaped who you were, mate. You know,
Yeah,
like those
that's
early
right.
years, as you say, looking back, you gone for selection earlier, but those early years shaped how
that's
you
right.
would how you would be in the unit.
Yeah, and you know, if I hadn't learnt some of those lessons, you never know, I might not have been in as good a stead like to do selection. So but I think 17 may be a touch too young to join the army. Probably 18 is a good time. So but that'd be about it, I reckon.
So what advice, mate, can you give to anyone who is thinking of joining Special Forces in preparation, both physically and mentally preparing for selection, and then because that's only the start, isn't it? Like getting to selections, and then that's when it starts.
Yeah, selection's just the first hurdle, really, and then you're on a year of being assessed under, but you know, that year after, some people see it as a stressor, like we're still being assessed and still can be cut. And yes, that is true, but like enjoy it. Like it was, the Rio cycle's there, like because you're doing cool shit and you're learning cool stuff. I think like enjoy the Rio cycle. If you get past selection, make the most of the Rio cycle. Make all your hits count, like do all the cool stuff. Make just 1%ers. In terms of getting ready for it, I think, you know, making sure you have the capacity and capability to do it before giving it a shot. And then if you don't have that, like don't go too early. A lot of people get it mixed the wrong way around. They go, I'll just go for broke, but they actually haven't trained enough, or they overestimate their ability, and then they bomb out and never go again. Whereas like, you know, another 6 weeks or miss this selection, they could be really red hot, ready to go. And then when you're absolutely sure you're ready to go, just go for broke. You'll wake up in the hospital, or you'll break something and someone will say it's over. But like, don't think about anything else. Just go with that mindset. I'll wake up in the hospital. They're not going to kill me mostly. And just go for broke.
No, it's great advice, mate. And looking back now, mate, you served with some amazing guys we've mentioned throughout the podcast in the 2nd Commando Regiment, and you lost 12 commandos killed in action and 1 preparing for deployment. How do you want Australians to remember the boys, and how do you remember the guys that you serve with?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like, I think, you know, it really, with, you know, everything that came out with the Brereton report, and but obviously it was prematurely released, and so much flaws to that report and how the study and how it was conducted and things like that sort of overshadowed our the whole Afghan campaign. So, and I won't get into all the new, like how that stuffed up, but it was really grabbed and run with. You know, even we had a Prime Minister saying that we're reading some difficult truths, and he said the word truth, and I thought that's odd because like we now know that some of those things aren't truths, like they were just purely myths and purely like just rumour mill stuff. So like, you know, but like he said it publicly, they were truths. And so, you know, I think some people might have taken that as, that Brereton report couldn't be false. But sort of here to tell you that a lot of it is just, it's poor at best, and like there's a lot of rumour mill stuff. And don't let that overshadow like the good work that was done by like not only the entire ADF, but particularly the Special Forces elements, like and, you know, I'll speak to my unit. Like, we put in the hard yards. We had an accelerated growth cycle. You know, SASR had decades to build a really good capability, and we built ours, you know, in a shorter time period because we were just op-driven and just did the hard yards. So, you know, remember those boys for, like, the hard charges that they were. Don't feel sorry for them. You can feel empathetic for them and their families, but don't feel sorry for them. Like, we knew what we were in for. And those guys, you know, they were warriors, so like that's who they are. Like, yeah, that would probably be the biggest thing. I sometimes feel people go, you know, I feel sorry for them, and you're like, why? Like, you know, if you didn't think they had smiles on their faces as they were running and gunning, you're kidding yourself. So,
and
yeah.
Mate, recently you served alongside the late Nick Hill.
Yep.
What do you remember of your time serving alongside Nick?
Yeah, Nick was great. You know, when we heard Nick was going to be our CSM, we'd heard rumours of how Nick was. He's very abrasive. And so we were shitting ourselves, most of us that hadn't met him. And I was like, yeah, not looking forward to him. And typically when I first met him, very gruff, very short with me. like, yep, what are you doing? Get out. So then, all right, yep, sweet. But no, we actually became like pretty decent, like friends, sit down, have a big chat, at the mess in between jobs, whatever. He was short and to the point, but he demanded a high bar, and that's all it was. Like, people are going, oh, is it this and that? And you're like, well, he's just holding a standard, and it might be above what we need, but like, who cares? Like, we'll be better than somebody else. We'll be better than that company. We'll be better than that group over there. So that's what I sort of remember Nick for, high standard. And if you wanted to do something loose, as long as you run it by him and he knew about it, so he could give you ass cover later. But if you gave him if he got a smack when you didn't give him a heads up, something was coming around the corner, then you got a smack as well. So, but no, still, like, you'll hear Bravo Company guys now, and a lot of guys will say best CSM we had. So
Yeah, he was one that I've heard a lot of guys say that he was hard, but he was fair, and
absolutely,
and he was for his boys. He would go into bat for you guys no matter what. And just that standard, as you say, maintain that standard, that bar. That it was, and throughout so many podcasts that I've spoken to, so many guys have said that daily renewable contract. It doesn't matter how good you were yesterday. Today's a new day, and that was Nick, mate.
Yeah, and daily renewable contract, I believe, is still like something that we run at the unit. Like, it's just it is what it is. Like, you can't just be shit. Like, you can't just have shit days. If you're not doing so well, you can let someone know, and just they'll help you and lift you if as they need. But it is a daily renewable contract, and Nick held that really high. Like, made a mistake, ones that are unacceptable, you're out. So show cause, stay in the unit. Show cause to stay in Bravo Company.
Well, that's he was old school Bravo, and as he said on his podcast, mate, when I interviewed him a fair while back now, he said that your beret it's harder to keep it than it is to earn it.
Yeah. I definitely think so, and yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And for you, mate, looking back, John, now as you served for 16 years, serving your country, was joining the army still the best decision you made, looking back now?
Absolutely. Like, I made the decision too early in life, and like my path was that way, and like I said, I'm lucky I wasn't derailed by an incident or an accident type thing. No, I'd still choose it. Whether I'd let my kids do it, I'm not sure. I'd have to see how everything sort of washes out in the next few years, like how they're going to treat their people. I do think it's overstated, the PC culture. I do think it's a little bit overstated in some of these, I think there is still your core group of solid individuals, and our army's in really good stead. So yeah, I think I'd join again. And particularly when I decided to join, it just happened to be at the right time. And there'd been 30 years of nothingness.
And then 20 years of
then 20 years of just drinking through a fire hose. So I was pretty lucky with my time and happy with it for sure.
Absolutely. And mate, how do people get in contact with you?
Probably just via Instagram. Hey, if you once you tag this on the podcast or whatever, like, if they want to reach out, got any questions, happy to answer it. Like, particularly about SF. Although lots of things have changed now, I still get down there every so often and watch these super soldiers do what they do. And but I can still provide a few tips.
Absolutely. And mate, just lastly, I've got a quote that I want to finish with in a minute. But mate, what advice can you give to anyone to just if they're really down and they're having a tough time, what advice can you give to them to just, try and prop them up and just say that it'll be okay?
Yeah, I guess that one's a little bit tough. One's always like to go reach out to a friend, like almost, like I said, I've got access to that property where I go hunting and camping on with, but instantly you reach out to one of your good mates or whatever, and you end up there, and you could be feeling a bit low or whatever. Instantly you're right back there having a fucking giggle around the campfire, telling tall stories or whatever. So I think keeping a friend network up, and also like it's just a period of time, like 1 week from now, like while you're feeling down, you'll be good, right? Like 2 weeks from now, you'll be even better. And I sort of use that strategy when we lost my brother. Like, I just need to get a month from now, and I know that this will be less painful. Then I need to get 6 months from now, and it'll be less painful again. And it'll be a year from now, and it'll be less painful. So I think just not getting stuck in that moment. And I think if you don't think that you'll be in less pain in a week or so, or 2 weeks or so, I think like you seriously need to take ownership of your own mental health and seek help. Then I think like you need to go, well, in a week's time, I don't think I'll be any better. And just, mental health is our own responsibility. I think we just need to, look after yourself.
Mate, it's a great point you touch on because, like I've just recently written my book and I talk about my suicide attempt and the hardest thing for me, mate, was to put my hand up and say, hey, I'm not okay.
Oh, 100%.
And that's the biggest thing. If it's not weak to speak, don't ever think it's that old mindset is it's a crock of shit. It is.
Yep.
And you know it firsthand as well that if you put your hand up, you'll actually be commended by so many people for saying, hey, this problem's actually got too big for me. I need a bit of help. And,
that's right.
And that's, as you say, mate, it's accountability to yourself and to go, all right, it's got too big. I know I now need to look at options that, and find out what works for you. You know yourself. Like find it. You go on that property and go hunting and go and be with the boys. That's for you. That's awesome. There's other things that people do like meditation or, journaling or whatever it is, motorbike riding or just find what works for you.
Yeah, and I think like with the mental health space, like you seek in every other part of your life, you seek out a specialist. So you want to build a house and don't know how to, you get a builder. Like you got a big open flesh wound on your leg, you don't go,
I'll just let it go.
It should be right in a week. Like if you don't think that it's actually going to be right in a week, like you're going to seek help somewhere. Like, and it's just like, you want to get your training on point and you don't know how to, you go speak to a PT. You want to get your diet on point, you speak to a dietitian. Everyone does that. And then with mental health, some people are a bit hesitant. You're like, well, if you don't know how to solve it, like somebody else might have a good chance at it. Like, so just go get it and sort it out.
Well, it's something, mate, that you say too. Like, you want the perfect body, you get a PT. Well, your mental health is the same. We need to be working on it every day. You can't just. It's a muscle. You need to work it every day. Like, you need to exercise it because otherwise, it is going to get weak, and you are going to have those moments. And that's the thing. Like, you want the six pack, but get strong mentally too.
Yeah.
So great point you touch on. But mate, I want to finish with this quote. So, John, you have served your country with honour and brought pride to your family. Your story is one of true grit, determination, having the courage to be brave and test yourself and succeed at the elite level. And the quote is, courage above all things is the first quality of a warrior. You are a true warrior and a true leader. John, I believe this quote sums you up, and I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story, and I want to thank you for the work that you do for first responders, veterans, and many others who are struggling with mental health. And it has been an absolute honour and a privilege to share your story. So, John Dixon, thank you so much for coming on True Blue Conversations.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Raise your glasses, podcasters. This episode of True Blue Conversations is brought to you by Wet Canteen Bottling Company, the perfect way to commemorate and celebrate life's most special occasions. Elevate your moments, savour the taste, and make them truly unforgettable with Wet Canteen. Head on over to wetcanteenbottlingco.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Now, on with the show. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. See you on the front line.